The year 1066 AD. The month, October. The day, 14. A day that saw a massive turning point in history and contribution to some of the worst cuisine found in the modern world. A day that saw a dramatic showdown for the throne and future of a small country you may have heard of called England. A day for a battle. This is the Battle of Hastings, explained poorly. Rarely does a battle of this size happen on a whim, so let's first set the stage. Okay, so there's this guy named Edward the Confessor, and he's like the king of England or whatever, so kind of a big deal. But Edward didn't have any kids, so everybody started wondering who would take over when he kicked the bucket. Two main contenders threw their hats or crowns into the ring. In one corner, we have Harold Godwinson, Edward's buddy and powerful English nobleman and earl. In the other corner, a guy named William the Bastard, who thought to himself, I really gotta get a new title. He's the Duke of Normandy, which I'm told is somewhere in France. Edward was being a bit wishy-washy on choosing a successor, which as a king with no apparent heir is always a fantastic way to ensure things don't turn into bloody chaos upon your death, and unfortunately never really settled on a solid pick. Near the end of 1065, he fell into an unfortunate coma and regained consciousness just long enough to point to Harold and tell him to take the kingdom and his soon-to-be widow if it wasn't too much trouble, which seemed a bit convenient. Others thought so too, but regardless, the Witten took place and the noblemen of England somewhat officially named Harold king.
And there was much rejoicing.
But not everyone was there, so it's kind of like declaring yourself king of your apartment while your roommates are gone. Back to our friend William, who far across the English Channel in Normandy and having consolidated power there, thought the timing suspect as well. Him and his Normans also made the case that even if the last-ditch succession had occurred, a delirious and dying man on his deathbed maybe wasn't in the best shape to make such a decision, and therefore the succession illegitimate. William also claimed that Edward promised him the throne before Harold and did it with a pinky swear no takebacks, and thought to himself, conqueror sounds a lot cooler as a title than bastards, so let's get to some conquering. He was also declared king of England, which for you sharp-minded historians out there know, having two kings for one kingdom is always a recipe for success. And so began the English Game of Thrones with just a couple less dragons. As Harold settles into his new digs and starts being kingly, news reaches him that William was coming to England, and he wasn't exactly planning on bringing gifts to celebrate the new monarch. William had gathered a sizable army and naval landing force from various nobility across the regions and provinces of France, intent on invading and seizing the throne. Harold quickly gathered an army of his own and waited near the coast for the arrival of the normies. And waited, and waited, and waited. Turns out keeping an army together is hard and, more importantly, expensive. With summer ending and the harvest coming, Harold told his army of farmers to get back to farming, and they disbanded on September 8th as he headed back to London. In a stroke of exceedingly bad luck for Harold, that same exact day, another claimant to the throne, the Norwegian king Harald Hardrada, with the help of Tostig Godwinson, Harold's exiled brother, decided to take their shot at the throne and invaded northern England with reinforcements from Orkney and Flanders. Harold marched north, gathering what troops he could on the way, and decisively beat the Norwegians at Stamford Bridge, killing both Harold and his brother, trimming off a bit of the old family tree. Just a few days after the battle, a battered and weakened Harold and company hear of an invasion in the south, as our friend William has conquered the English Channel and finally lands his forces in England. William embraces the meta, quick building a wooden castle in Hastings and exploiting enemy AI to raid nearby villages and farms, after some small skirmishes where he kited the enemy troops while reportedly screaming, "GG no read." The actual size of William's army is up for debate, but it was at least several thousand strong with mostly infantry, a good amount of cavalry, and some bow and crossbowmen. A well-balanced force, once again embracing the Norman-French meta of the time. As Harold marched his way south with several thousand men of his own, his forces consisted entirely of infantry, a non-meta army comp that would have dire consequences. Arriving in Hastings, Harold attempted what historians refer to as the Obi-Wan maneuver, taking the high ground on Senlac Hill, just a few miles from William's castle. William, determining that the best defense is a good offense, marches out from his castle to assault Harold's army, and so the battle begins. William's forces start off by firing volleys of arrows up at Harold's troops, who have formed a shield wall along the hill. The Obi-Wan proves effective as the angle makes the archers largely ineffective. Climbing uphill in heavy armor towards lots of pointy things that want to stab you doesn't exactly sound like a good time to me, and William's men thought so too, as they suffered heavy casualties trying to break the shield wall. With the infantry assault floundering, William then sent his cavalry straight up the hill, and they were also pushed back. The normies in general fall back and are pursued by Harold's forces, who break defensive lines and the shield wall to now attack. This proves fatal as they overextend in their overconfidence, expose themselves, and are almost cut off and completely surrounded. Falling back to the top of the hill, this back and forth continues throughout the day. The Normie army, with a +5 to mobility from cavalry, are able to navigate the battlefield a little more freely, outmaneuvering and exhausting Harold's troops. As the battle rages, Harold tries a bold new strategy wherein he attempts to catch an arrow with his face. This tactic proves ineffective, as he is killed instantly. Harold's forces suffer a debuff to their morale and a -10 to their leadership stat. Now Haroldless, they panic and begin to rout. The normies take advantage and press forward, and other than a few brave troops from Harold's royal household, the English army is completely and utterly defeated. Marching onto London and squashing small pockets of resistance along the way, William the Bastard finally secures himself a shiny new nickname, William the Conqueror, and eventually King William I of England. It wasn't all over, as there was more conquering to be done, but as the Norman conquest began and progressed through the country, England started getting all mixed up with Norman French culture, which others will say heavily impacted the English language, but I never got that. To be honest, this occasion and ballet of a rendezvous has always seemed like a facade rather than actual English heritage, although saying so might be a faux pas. And now you kind of know the history of the Battle of Hastings and Harold Godwinson, who used to be a king until he took an arrow to the eye. I'm extremely excited to start this new series and new channel. If you liked the video, subscribe for more, and let's continue to learn poorly.